Welcome to Inside the Program, presented by Academy Sports and Outdoors. I'm Joe Cook, got Eric Nalin. Thank you for watching. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and of course, subscribe to Inside Texas. Even though spring ball is wrapping up, we're going to have all the latest inside notes from the Longhorns 15 spring practices, everything going forward, recruiting, summer workouts, official visits, all the different things that are going to be going on up until they get to the week before Ohio State. Now's a great time to join. So head to Inside Texas, 4 months for just $1. And hey, today's the day. Texas versus Texas A&M at the Dish tonight at 7. We have a tailgate giveaway presented by our friends at Academy. All this stuff's in my car, ready to get to the center field dish berm behind the scoreboard in between the tennis center. So show up. You could win a Blackstone 28-inch omnivore griddle, a Yeti hard cooler, a 10x10 Texas flag canopy, 2 Texas folding chairs, and two Yeti 20-ounce tumblers. No purchase necessary, must be present, 1 entry per person, and you've got to be 18 years old. We're looking forward to seeing everybody out there. Should be a lot of fun. But Texas has 14 spring practices down. On Saturday morning, they'll have their last spring practice. But we have enough data to kind of know what's going over. Before we get to that, though, Eric, Thursday night, first round of the draft.
Yeah.
3 Longhorns get taken. Kelvin Banks, Jahdae Barron, Matthew Golden. Awesome to see those guys have their dreams fulfilled. But there was some familiarity that helped one of those selections find his new home.
Yeah, when Kelvin Banks got drafted, I smiled for a number of reasons. First, I knew him back when he was 8th, 9th grade, maybe. I think 8th grade going into 9th grade. I was at a camp, and one of the camp instructors pulled me aside and said, "That's going to be the best tackle in America as a senior." And I looked at Kelvin and I said, I don't know about that, because he had such a long way to go. That guy nailed it. Kelvin turned out to be a stud 5-star and lived up to the hype immediately. I couldn't help but smile seeing Kelvin go that high. I also smiled for another reason. That Bo Davis and Terry Joseph, were singing his praises behind the scenes. Obviously Steve Sarkisian's going to give a great recommendation on him, but those coaches being around Kelvin for as long as they were, and Bo Davis's guys going up against Kelvin, and Terry Joseph just being around the program for 3 years. Obviously, they gave the sign of approval on him. I just couldn't be happier for him. Jahdae, I think about 15 teams are going to end up regretting passing on him. He slipped to 20. Denver Broncos got a baller. I think he's going to be an absolute stud. I love the comparisons to Trent McDuffie for the Kansas City Chiefs. I think that nails it. I think he's going to be an absolute stud. And then, Matthew Golden, you're a wide receiver. You just want the first thing you check is like, all right, who's their quarterback? They've got a quarterback. They throw it around pretty prolifically. So you're happy for him. He's going to produce. I think he's got a very high floor. All 3 of those guys, I think, have a very high floor. Kelvin Banks, I think a lot of the concerns about him were unfounded. Some people had him slipping to 25 maybe. I just never saw that. You look at the body of work. We talk about traits matter more than anything else. He had traits and tape. So, I think 9 might end up being a little bit low when we look back on that 10 years from now.
What about other guys? Today is day 2 of the draft. That means round 2 and round 3. Who do you expect to maybe hear their names called? Maybe Quinn Ewers, Andrew Makuba. Can anybody else join them?
Look, man, I wrote an article yesterday. I would take Makuba in the late first, early second. I think if, all the rage in the NFL is trying to defend deep, right? Everybody's throwing it over the top. Is there a better center fielder in the draft than Andrew Makuba? I'm not sure about that. And then on top of it, I love his toughness. I don't care that he's 186 pounds. 186 pounds would matter to me more if he wasn't wired the way he was. That kid is tough. He grew up tough. If you know his family's history, moving to America and all that stuff, that guy's going to throw his body on the line every play. And then, of course, he can defend a deep middle like very few can. So he's Ken Griffey Jr. back there. So I would have taken him in the first if I had that need. But I think he should go in the second. Now, some people have him mocked in the third. I don't know. I don't think there's a flaw in his game. And then Alfred Collins, obviously big guy, scarcity. We always talk about that. Good athlete. Got much better at the point of attack over his career. I think, I guess there's some injury concerns about him. I heard about a calf strain. I don't know how that would hurt his draft stock, but I could see Alfred going in the second for sure. And then Quinn Ewers, man, the quarterbacks, Jackson Dart came off the board. Some people that probably had Jackson Dart a little bit ahead of Quinn. If they wanted Jackson, they might be looking at Quinn a little bit. They might get a little bit more excited about Quinn in the second round. I don't expect him to fall out of round 2 just because the passing upside is there. Put him in an offense that's conducive to him. That can take advantage of his strengths, middle of the field, mid range game, RPOs, that sort of thing. I think he's going to go in the second. So I think the potential for 3 guys is there. Probably, maybe Gunnar Helm. Could Gunnar Helm sneak into the second? You got Warren off the board, Loveland. I had Loveland ahead of Warren. I didn't see a whole lot of people doing it. I was glad to see Loveland go ahead of Warren. To me, on tape, Colston, I love that dude. But I think Gunnar Helm is going to probably be in the mix to come in late second round, maybe third round.
I wonder if Cam Williams, I know he's got injury concerns right now, but maybe teams see that size and see what he did and spend a pick there, and then we'll see what happens.
Well, we got to talk about him because I wrote yesterday that I would take him in the second round all day long. I think you can get these guys on a bargain. I likened it to Adonai Mitchell. Adonai Mitchell went in the second round last year to the Colts. If Adonai Mitchell would have come back for a senior year, I think he would have been the first wide receiver off the board outside, regardless of, Hunter, however you consider Hunter. I think he would have been a, probably top 15, top 10 pick. I think if you look at Cam Williams, had he come back for a senior year, what are we thinking about there? So get him now. It's a bargain. But then you still have that really high upside. You're going to have to spike a year. He's not going to offer you anything as a rookie. But the ROI long term, I think, is going to be there for Cam Williams. I would take him in the second, despite all the issues I had with him this year. All the tape was not great at times. The tape was also exceptional at times. I would bet on him long term, and I would try to get him now because, like I said, had he come back for another year, we're probably talking about a first rounder.
We'll see what happens with Isaiah Bond and Jaden Blue. Maybe we'll hear their names going forward into day 3. But no matter what happens, the NFL draft's a great advertisement for Texas these days. It used to be the biggest point of emphasis on negative recruiting for a lot of these schools, and we'd always talk about it. There's the lull, and then it'd always be around official visit season when all these teams showcase, like, hey, we're putting these players in the draft, we're putting these players in the draft, we're putting these players in the draft, and Texas is not. And now that's a little bit different. But Eric, there's a cool aspect to it, and that all the developmental tails are different, and that you can look at that in the first round, and you can look at that going forward. You've got the transfers who make the most of their opportunity. You've got 3 and out guys. And granted, this is a little bit of a symptom of the COVID eligibility quirk, but then you got 5th-year guys who are doing everything, and that is something that Texas can use on the trail to a lot of success.
Yeah, when this staff was first hired, I wrote an article, and the gist of it was that buildings don't develop people, coaches develop people. And I got a like out of Jeff Banks on Twitter from that way back in the day. And the point was that it doesn't matter what the previous staff did or how they evaluated or developed. That didn't matter. It's, look at the coaches that they brought in and the track record, and their track record, whether it's Sark, whether it's Banks, whether it's PK, it's all coming to fruition, and so we're seeing tremendous success. So it's right in line with the success that they had at previous stops. And I don't know why that was going to stop at a place like Texas, especially as we entered the NIL era. It just made perfect sense that to me, this is the logical conclusion of having Texas resolve, putting resources in place, and then having these coaches. So I'm not surprised by this at all, but now Texas has to take advantage of it, and I think they're doing that. They're making it transactional. Nobody wants to leave Texas. I've been saying that since they went 5-7. Nobody wants to leave Texas. They see what's happening. They see, like you said, you can be a 3-and-done guy, or you can be a 5-year guy and still go in the first round. It used to be like, oh man, if you're 5th year, or if you have to redshirt, you almost, fans will consider you a bust. You've got 5-year guys going in the first round. Jahdae Barron, you got, Alfred Collins is going to go in the second round probably. Vernon Broughton's going to get drafted here probably tomorrow. So, I mean, there's just so many success stories. And then what does Stark do with that? They make it transactional. Nobody wants to leave. It's easier to get guys out of the portal. It's easier to recruit. Guys that see the big picture are not going to look for – they're not going to take a lesser school and a lesser opportunity but for more money. In place of Texas. They're going to go to Texas. Texas is still going to pay you market value. They're not going to break the market, in most cases. Sometimes they will, but for most cases they won't. They're going to. But on the flip side, if you go to Texas, you take that market value. you're going to get turned into an NFL guy, and then you're talking about real money. That it's real money in college, but it gets a whole lot realer in the NFL.
Before we keep going into some spring notes and some portal intel, a word from Academy Sports and Outdoors.
Days like this, the anticipation's half the fun. The call to adventure. Possibilities in every direction.
Look at that.
The stories you'll bring back, even the true ones. And always, already, you can't wait until next time. From first catch to biggest catch of the season, this is where it starts. Academy Sports and Outdoors. Have fun out there.
Time to talk a little bit about spring football. 14 practices down, 1 left, and there are a number of players over the course of the spring who made the most of their opportunities. Let's go on defense first. We know what Texas has with Anthony Hill. Have a good idea of what's going on alongside him with Leon Galafau, Trey Moore being there as well. But one of the transfers Texas brought in has really done a great job over the course of 14 practices.
Yeah, we're hearing about Trey Moore more at edge, and I think that ties into Brad Spence balling out. Almost every practice I hear about Brad Spence, whether it's they're moving him on blitz packages down on the line of scrimmage as well. But I think one of the stories of spring for me so far is that Brad Spence is comfortable in coverage. We're hearing really good things about him. It's almost like I don't want to say it, but they could potentially have 3 starters there with Hill, Leon Galafau, and Spence. Yeah, I think. We knew that he could get downhill. We knew that he was a big, powerful guy, could rush the passer. He gave Kelvin Banks a little bit of trouble here and there. But I didn't know that he was going to be able to play in reverse like he is. So everything we're hearing on Brad Spence is really good. I think, I expect him to play a lot this year. And then hopefully he's the heir apparent to Anthony Hill, and Texas won't really skip a beat in 2026.
Would be a great thing to see him have a lot of success. And yeah, you talk about going backwards. With guys like Anthony Hill, it took him a little while. Now that's one of his strong suits. If it's coming along for Spence, it speaks really well to what Johnny Nanson's able to do. We always kind of mention who's turning heads, which freshman's turning heads, that type of thing. Yeah. Something you got back and talking to your sources, and something I remember talking to recruits who were there on the April 12th scrimmage. Everybody was talking about Nick Brooks out of Grayson, Georgia, the offensive lineman. Maybe thought he might have been an interior guy, but over the course of these spring practices, he has proven almost without a doubt that he's going to be a tackle at Texas and is playing pretty darn well against some great edges so far.
Yeah, well, I mean, even before spring ball, we were hearing great things about him, his maturation in strength and conditioning, and just his coachability, the taking to the leaders, the older guys, and just kind of being on their hip pocket and learning as much as he can. He's a sponge. We didn't know, it might be more important that he's not from Georgia, that he's from Iowa. You wonder how Iowa had all these NFL guys left and right, offensive linemen. Maybe there's something in the water up there. But I think, we're a little ahead of time talking about him, I think, because you got Trevor Gooseby, but I think Trevor Gooseby's only got 1 year as a full-time starter. But then after that, it's Nick Brooks. And we're hearing similar things that we heard about Gooseby to Nick Brooks. And, we're not surprised that Gooseby, maybe we were a little surprised that he played as well as he did in his snaps, especially getting thrust in there, against the competition that he was. But we weren't really surprised because we've always been hearing good things about Gooseby. We're hearing those same things about Nick Brooks. He sounds like a future first round, second round left tackle.
Good pull from Kyle Flood out of Georgia or out of Iowa, whatever you want to call it. Last but not least, running back has been, they're losing Jaden Blue to the NFL draft. May hear him today or tomorrow. And there are a lot of eyes, obviously, on what C.J. Baxter may be able to do whenever he's healthy. Mm-hmm. Trey Wisner comes back, but a guy who is healthy from an injury sustained last year in Christian Clark has made the most of not only returning to play, but returning to play earlier than I think a lot of people expected, and also returning to a high level of play as well.
Yeah. Oh, man, totally surprising. I spent a lot of the time leading up to spring ball talking about Jared Gibson, and, that's where the information was. But we always follow the information. It doesn't matter our opinions. We'll reverse course if we have to. And Gibson has had a good spring, and Trey Wisner's had a good spring. But I think the guy that's stock up here is Christian Clark. We're very surprised that he's back. First of all, that he's going in spring ball to begin with. But then to hear that his cutting ability is right back where it was before he got hurt. It's tremendous. Like, he's going to play a lot this year. I think he's going to turn heads. He's going to flash. Now, I think he's still a little bit raw. He came to Texas a little bit raw, and that, he lost a developmental year. So in some regards, he's got to catch up for that. But he's such a natural guy, and it's a position where it really selects for natural people, where he's got the feet balance and the vision, the cutting ability that you're just born with. You either have it or you don't. It's not something you coach up. He's got those traits. He can see the hole and he can get there. He can get to it and through it. I think he's going to play a lot this year. He's had a good spring, very encouraging. I think the running back room overall has done a really good job. And then they get CJ Baxter in August. I expect Christian Clark to play a lot this year based on how spring's gone for him.
There are some other names who've drawn praise over the course of spring practices. Dalen McCutcheon's one that we hear. Amari Winston's one that we hear. But I think,
oh man,
guys,
yeah, I feel like we got to talk about Winston. This list could have gone longer, and I'll have to write it up on IT and go a little bit more in depth. But Emory Winston, especially, again, we like to course correct. If we're sleeping on the guy, we're going to catch up. We're going to make up for it. We weren't talking about him enough, apparently. He's turning heads in spring. I'm hearing it from a number of different people. This isn't just one person that, caught a random practice or whatever. It's a consistent theme that Emory Winston knows how to get open, knows what, he's smart. He sees what the defense is doing. He knows how to get open based on what he expects the defense to do. He's on the same page with Arch. Emory's going to play a lot. Now, they just brought in injuries, of course, and Jordan Washington's going to be an absolute stud. But Emory Winston has a bright future. And then Dalen McCutcheon is taking advantage of, DeAndre Moore being out for the spring. Very bright future. Now, I don't know exactly what to expect out of those true freshmen yet, just because they've got, they brought in Mosley. I think Mosley's probably going to end up being inside. Moore's probably going to go outside. Dalen McCutcheon, I think he's definitely the most ready out of the true freshmen. He's turning heads. He's going to be a star at some point. It's just, when is that point? We're not quite yet sure.
Speaking of Mosley, speaking of injuries, those are some guys that Texas has added from the portal, at least as it goes to the pass catching core. But you had some other portal notes that you posted over on the Inside Texas members only board about what their strategy may be going forward. The window, I think, closes today. That's not a deadline on decisions on where you're going to school. It's a deadline on if you want to enter. But for the Longhorns, what's the latest on what their strategy may be in the transfer portal going forward?
Yeah, I gave them an A so far, and it had a chance to go to A+ if they brought in a difference maker at wide receiver. I just don't think it's going to happen. They had two guys that they liked, and they just didn't go in. Texas has the gas pedal to get it done. The resources are in place, but they're not going to just add a guy to add a guy. Mosley lifted the floor. They feel like he's a wide receiver number 3. I think he's going to play in the slot. DeAndre Moore is going to go outside. Some people might have concerns about that, but we've been talking about DeAndre Moore being one of the fastest guys on the team for years now. So I think he's got the speed there. Hands, that remains to be seen. Hopefully, the LASIK surgery is going to help him out in that regard. It's definitely not an effort thing or a concentration. Like, it's just, we've got to see it on the field. But he can be a vertical threat outside if they end up moving there. It's just not going to happen with the wide receiver. A couple guys that they really like just, didn't go in. If Texas needs them, think how much their current team needs them too. So that one's not going to work out, unfortunately, but, they've done really well so far, and I don't think they're done. I think there's going to be another guy, maybe potentially 2 additions still. Michael Kern going into the portal yesterday, wasn't that foreshadowing? I think so. I think they needed room for 2 guys, and there's still some intrigue left. I'd like to say a little bit more about it, but you don't want to upset the apple cart. Let's just let it play out.
I can't let this go by. DeAndre Moore should get an NIL deal. So.
Oh yeah. Maybe you should have let that go by. I don't know. I had a really bad joke the other day that I was really disappointed in, that I too many people saw it before I could delete it. It happens to the best of us.
Oh man, all good stuff. We'll have more over on InsideTexas.com, but of course, go to Inside Texas. You can get 4 months for just $1. Today is April 25th. And hey, that probably that'd be the Sunday before the Ohio State game. So come on, join us. You'll get all the preseason camp notes, everything up to that point in July, June, May, all the recruiting intel and summer workout intel. And of course, if you're in Austin, head to the Dish Inside Texas has a tailgate giveaway presented by our friends at Academy. You can win all these great prizes: Blackstone griddle, hard cooler, and tumblers from Yeti, folding chairs, and a Texas flag canopy. So come check us out. We'll be over there later today. And stick with Inside Texas. We'll have full coverage of the NFL draft. So, Eric, thank you so much. Thank you for watching.
Hey, hold on. Hey, people need to come out. We got tacos from Taco Joint, one of our favorite places, right? We love Taco Joint. We got a huge business meeting at Posse East right before that, like me and Joe, dude. That's where we commiserate. But yeah, come out, Academy, and feel free, come up, ask any question you want. There's a lot of stuff I'll say in person that, obviously it's a little bit more sensitive. I'll tell you the names that, that we were talking about, wide receiver that didn't come to fruition. And any other question you might have, please come out and see us in person. It's a lot more fun. It's a lot more fun in person than it is on the website.
We'll have a bunch of us out there. I think Keenan and even a few more will be making their way. Evan as well, ahead of the game 1 versus the Aggies. So thank you for watching. Again, come see us out there. We'll see you next time on Inside the Program, presented by Academy Sports and Outdoors.